session. I welcome everybody here. This is one of the largest groups that we've had since I've been in for this last term. My previous term, we've had some groups like this, standing room only. At any rate, presiding over as I'm presiding over tonight's review session, I'm going to set up some rules, and I think I've told everybody. We'll try to keep the meeting running smoothly and not last all evening long. We are not broadcasting this meeting, or you video.
I am videotaping it.
Yes,
Yes,
videotaping, but we are not broadcasting. None of the microphones are working, so you don't have to try to talk into the microphone. Just speak up so everybody can hear you. For lack of a better description, I will allow for the for and against groups to address council for a total of 15 minutes. And when I say as a group, it could be one speaker, it could be 3 people, but I'm only going to give you 15 minutes to give your presentations. After that, then I'll let the opposing group give it another 5 minutes to rebut anything that has been said. So we'll get through the 15 minutes first. And I've already flipped a coin, and we've already determined who is going to speak first. After both sides made their presentations, then it's time for the council people, for us to do our discussions. We can ask questions, please answer. So that's the time for us to review the information that we've got and have our discussion. After we're done with the council people having their discussion, and we're done at that point, I will allow some audience participation, not from the people that were in the previous presentation groups, but so that we don't, again, go forever. I will limit it to 2 minutes, so make it brief, and no more than 10 people, and I already have 10 people on the sheet here. So, with that all being said, I will, who's speaking on the part of Piketon Council Group? First, or you, sir?
We're second.
We're second.
I'm
We
sorry.
won that.
We want
We're
point.
going to go second.
You won the toss, you want to go second? Sure.
It's NFL rules.
Just like football. Which end of the stadium?
That's right.
All right, so we'll let the Piketon Facility Group start. Whoever would like to come up and speak for them.
Okay. So, my name's Joel Bradburn, and I'm pleased to be able to come and talk to the council. Thank you very much for the invite. I'm going to go through reasonably quick and talk to you about how we got to where we're at and where we're going, and then I'm going to turn it over to J.D. Chu to talk about the technical aspects of on-site disposal. So, it's a lot to cover in a very short amount of time, but a little bit about the environmental management organization. So I'm a federal employee. I work for Department of Energy, specifically in environmental management. And our job is across the nation to clean up the legacy of the weapons programs that started back in the late 40s, early 50s, and continued up until the end of the Cold War. So you can see about a site map up there that talks about basically what it used to be, and as of 2012, the remaining sites, we get a budget. It's appropriated by Congress, and that's how we go about, and as they designate, we spend our money, do our job, and I have the fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayer. Can I get 2 seconds back on the clock?
Yes, you can. Sorry. I put a paper underneath there trying to get it more in the middle, and tried to, but now that you got the image up there, it's not, so sorry about that. No, but you're fine.
No, but anyway, so my specific focus, so I'm the Deputy Manager of PPPO, so PPPO Enforcement Paducah Project Office. There's a gaseous diffusion plant in Paducah and a gaseous diffusion plant down in Piketon, and so my specific responsibility is the Piketon facility. Okay, so you flip it, Jeff. So anyway, site, just give you a little bit of intro, and appreciate those of you that made it down to the site. For those of you that didn't, open invitation to come and visit our place. Anyway, in 54 through 89, it was focused on national defense. Okay, then it transitioned to the nuclear power material production, and that was primarily under USEC, if you were familiar with USEC. In 2001, the plant shut down, ceased operations, and then in 2011-12, the bulk of the plant was transitioned back to the department from private operation under USEC back to the Department of Energy, and that's when we started to clean up in earnest. The plant itself, big place, big buildings. I'm not going to read all this stuff to you, but gaseous diffusion plants are characterized by great big process buildings. And we have 3 of them that characterize our site, and they're some of the biggest in the world. You're talking about a roof itself that's about 33 acres. I'm a resident of Chillicothe. I have 4 kids that I ran through high school here, and I would have a hard time getting any one of them to cut that grass on top of the roof too. The other thing that we have is about 30,000 cylinders of depleted UF6 at the site. If you're familiar with the DUF6 project, that project is an EM project specifically to process and dispose of the depleted UF6 cylinders and byproduct of enrichment operations. The site also, since we started in the 50s, there is some legacy contamination on the site. Some of it consists of some groundwater plumes, and that is primary contaminant there is trichloroethylene. That's a classic degreasing solvent at the time. We also have some landfills on site. That was, again, typical waste management processes of that era. And then because we're a part of national defense, there is a piece of security there, so that there's a desire to keep things on site in the interest of national defense. Once we started, got the site back, we were making concerted efforts. We are proud of our work and our outreach into the community. We enlisted the support of Ohio University, so it's not us just wanting to go out and see what the end state of the site is and what the community interests are. We want to get some people out and involved in the community and solicit those, answer those questions, and we did that through Ohio University. Some of you may have participated on that. It started about 2011, and we went through 15 months, and you might remember it called Port's Future. Okay, and the net result of that was people wanted a future for the site. They wanted reindustrialization, and specifically, I've got the list there of in order of priority which ones popped in. Go ahead, Jeff. What we came up with is a shared in-state vision. Okay, so as part of the EM organization, we can't build something new like a car park or a new mission. Our job is to clean up, okay, and set the stage for whatever the next mission is or the desires of the community. And so what we came up with, as you can see, the picture of the site as it currently stands. The purple and the yellow up there, those represent landfills or plumes on site. And then the picture there on the right is where we ended up as part of our long dialogue with community and stakeholders. For the cleanup of the man-made structures on site, we went through a formal process, a circle process. Went through about 4.5 years of that. It's very open, very public, and we selected an alternative that Ohio EPA concurred on in 2015. Just as a point of reference, Ohio EPA is our primary regulator, and we are not a Superfund site, so US EPA plays a little bit, but primary oversight is Ohio EPA, which do a great job. Just so you know, 2 alternatives, what to do with the buildings and what to do with the waste from the buildings. We picked, take the buildings down, they're old, nobody is interested in the utility bill for those things. And then for on-site disposal, we had no action, everything off-site, or some things off-site, and then the bulk of the demolition debris, which is just classic building demolition, structure, steel, concrete, electrical kind of stuff, and some process piping and components on-site, those that met on-site disposal criteria. And so you can see through our regulatory process, alternative 2, what was selected, that's our end state. Alternative 3, which was not selected, that's everything off-site. So the biggest thing we get with alternative 2, because we have debris that we're going to leave on-site, some lightly contaminated debris, that gives us an opportunity to go and dig up and use soil. And the soil we've selected, we've targeted those landfills and plumes inside perimeter road. We baked that because we have to go through a federal budgeting process, very similar to what you have to go through here. We have to have a plan, which we request funding, and which then the President, the administration, and Congress agreed on. And so this, with our decisions in place, this is our life cycle baseline. This is our plan to complete. It's a pretty summary level, happy to come back and explain to you in detail, but it shows all the work scope there that gets our mission done, EM, and ends up with the in-state. Then it transitions over to legacy management, who then monitors the site from now into perpetuity. We have a similar arrangement at Fernald, so this is not the first time we've done this. The Fernald project is a great example, and invite you to go visit that place. So in summary, so we've committed to perform the cleanup. We get about $450 million every year to do our job. It looks, we estimate it's going to take about $14 billion to finish our work, and it's scheduled for about the 2034 time frame based on our funding that we get. We support in excess of 2,200 jobs, and that's at that level of funding, and we get flat funding. We don't necessarily get more or less. It's what we strive for, because you know, it's a heavy budgeting effort, and that's what we get and work for every year. I'll turn it over to JD, but I just want to say the other thing that's out front and center for us is safety. So we don't compromise on safety. If you have the folks that work in our site, you know safety is the first thing that they see when they enter the door. If you have a subcontractor, it's safety. That's first and foremost, and it also goes into our remedies on site. So I want to turn it over to JD, but again, I appreciate the opportunity and appreciate all the dialogue, including everybody in the room. I appreciate everybody's opportunity to have the conversation. Thank you.
I'm JD Chu, honored to be here to explain why OSWDF is safe. Okay? No matter what decision we make, if we cannot do it safely, we cannot do it. That's just not right. But we determined that OSWDF is a safe and viable alternative, and therefore could be part of the alternative too. And it was evaluated and selected as a decision. This is an overall study area, we call Area D, that at the end was selected for OSWDF. And this is a list of the basic field study we did in order to learn what's in the area. Surface, subsurface, all the way down, where the water is coming, where the water is going, and based on that we fit into the engineering design to determine under this site, given all the conditions, what is the best design and construction we can achieve. And in this 300 acres, this is the OSWDF footprint. So there are a lot of misinformation out there based on the overall range of the data. For example, groundwater, there's a statement in the reference say we encountered groundwater from 20 to 80 feet, okay? However, in the actual OSWDF footprint, it's 50 to 80, okay? It's an upper end because this is the hilltop. All the other area are lower, okay? So that type of information need to be properly communicated in order to say, hey, we do have a site that can be compliant with the regulation and be able to have a safe on-site disposal facility. But this is just a list of all the study we did, and we can come back to that. A lot of information come up from this test. Next. And one of the tests is actually excavate all the way down into the underlying geology. This is a 15 to 20 feet deep trench, 20 foot wide, 150 foot long, okay? And the Cuyahoga Formation include a 680, we call 680 sandstone layer because it's an elevation at 680 and it's pretty continuous under the OSWDF footprint. And in this particular area, if we go back one slide, Chef, I want to point out back. This is the location of that trench. So it's very close to OSWDF footprint. And we were able to excavate from the ground surface down. And ground surface happened to be the 680 sandstone layer. because that area was used for borrowed material 20 years ago. And even with the 680 sandstone layer on the ground surface, the Cuyahoga Formation underneath is still dry. And we were able to keep the vertical wall and took SSAV member down the trench and actually touch and feel and see that shell material to say, do you think this is good enough or not? We actually can ask that question. And again, another misinformation was out there. If you look at one of the later from Ferguson Group, they actually interpret our language in the IFS say we only dug a test trench 4 foot deep. Okay? But the 4 foot dip is just the first cut. We need to cut through that sandstone layer. So we have special heavy equipment to do that. And that happened to be 4 foot deep. But we keep digging, 20 feet deep overall. And actually can see more than a single boring can see. Single boring is 3 inch, 4 inch, but this is huge. You actually see the entire area, what is underneath. And even with 20-some years exposed on the ground surface, that sandstone layer, even with joint, vertical joint, okay, still was able to protect the Cuyahoga Formation underneath. The rainwater did not impact anything below that. And that sandstone is a very, very good sandstone. Buena Vista Formation, people actually use that to build bridge and building in Cincinnati and Chicago. So it's very, very strong and competent rock. And the formation underneath is dry. It's as good as any constructing company can achieve in a compacted clay formation. And we have 50 feet of that under that sandstone layer, okay? And you don't see water there, right? If you excavate that same depth in the middle of the side, you are already in water, okay? So we come to this area because it's high and dry and protected with very nice geological formation, okay?
You have about 2 minutes.
Okay, next. So this is the formation, and we have boring log that actually we correctively collect the information and summarize in the IFS. Yes, we have fracture, but not all the fracture are created equal, okay? So fracture is just the starting point. We study whether they are jointly connected and whether it influence the stability of the area or not. And conclusion is they're competent, the formation is stable, and we format and put the information in the modeling to say, okay, if it actually creates some pathway because of the fracture, and even if they are not, we model them to a point to be conservative, okay? So we actually did 3 things. Select the best location at the site, not just based on us, but based on ODNR say. Secondly, did the best engineering design and construction that we can achieve. The third thing we did was decide then what we want to put in the disposal facility to ensure we will be protective and safe for 1,000 years. So what we, at the end, decided to put in is only 0.3% of the radioactive inventory at the site. 99.7% of the radioactive inventory in terms of curie radioactivity actually will leave the site. Okay, so best location, best engineering design, and only 0.3% of radioactive material got put in there. And plus, we provide the capacity to consolidate all the existing landfill and plume inside the perimeter row and leave the middle of the site about 1,100 acres suitable for reindustrialization.
That's 15 minutes.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
You wanna close this out? Why don't you get in and do it? Why don't you help me out there, bro? Got an extra chair up there, Barry? Stand on one knee. Can I use one of those chairs? I'll use one. Thank you.
The least they can do after you go in the quarter.
Some quarterback.
Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate you, thank you. Whatever.
You ready?
I'm ready whenever.
Okay, well, thank you so much. My name is Carl Kalbacher. I'm with the Ferguson Group. You probably heard of us. And I've been retained by the Village of Piping as well as the local school district, the Scioto Valley Local School District, to provide a third-party assessment for this on-site waste disposal facility. I've been on retainer for about a year. Next slide, please. And just a very brief summary of who I am. I work out of Washington, D.C. I've been with the firm for 5 years doing environmental services, grant services, economic development. Prior to that, I spent the majority of my career working as a regulator. I was an environmental regulator. I was a state Superfund manager, both in the state of Maryland and in the state of Delaware, so I think that was the reason they hired me, because this was the work that I did in those states, interacting with the federal government, federal facilities, and the Superfund program. I'm also a technical person. I have a master's in geology, and I'm a registered professional geologist since 1993, and have been an adjunct instructor for about 26 years, so I have a strong foundation of the science as well as advocacy for my clients. Next slide, please. So today, what I'd like to do with the brief time that we have is go over three elements, I guess, of this presentation. And the first is relevant to where we were before the proposed plan was issued. There is a site-specific advisory board that is selected by the Department of Energy for this site, and they made a recommendation in 2013 that I think was reasonable and should have been accepted by DOE, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about why this site is so important, not only to Pike County, but also to neighboring counties. This is a very contaminated site, as was alluded to by Joel Bradburn, so we agree in that context. And it's very, very important that proactive measures be taken to eliminate the source of contamination. And that means complying with 1302. That has not been complied with or agreed to by the Department of Energy. And then you've heard quite a bit about the on-site waste disposal facility. So I'm going to give you a high-level view of some of the concerns that I see and the village sees with regard to the technical studies that were undertaken and the relationship of those studies to the regulations that apply to that site. Next slide, please. So to begin, in 2013, a group of citizens that was selected by the Department of Energy said, we know you're going to go forward with a landfill on site. If you do so, here are the conditions that we'd like you to adhere to. And if you can't adhere to these basic, reasonable conditions, then our support for your landfill is not given. And what did they say? Simple things that make great sense. No waste shall be derived from off-site. Don't bring any more stuff onto the property. 2, get those landfills, of which there are 13 within the perimeter complex, excavate them, consolidate them, and move them to a locality. Under 1302, that would be the on-site waste disposal facility. DOE has not committed to do that. The only way that you're going to get to the third burger dot, which is the consolidation of the groundwater plumes, is if you get rid of the source area. You cannot clean up this groundwater, the TCE that it was talked about, unless you get the source out of the ground. So that's the third element that the site-specific advisory board spoke to. The next 2 elements deal with highly toxic material that the advisory board does not want in that landfill. And I think there's general consensus that the DUF6 material should not go in the landfill, but the byproduct, the product that is created from the neutralization of such, should also not go into that landfill. And there needs to be clarity in writing, affirmatively saying, this material will not go in that landfill. We're waiting for that declaration that that is actually going to occur. And then, with regard to a reuse plan, there was talk about phenol. We're not interested in a phenol plan. We're interested in a Miamisburg mound plan that really speaks to a plan that talks about reindustrialization, reuse of that property. This comes from the Site-Specific Advisory Board. We agree with them. We'd like DOE to come back and say, yes, we agree, and we're in writing going to say, we agree. Next slide, please. So in 2015, when the record of decision was issued, and it didn't include what was in 1302, the advisory board said, you know what? Our support is withdrawn. It took another 2 years for DOE to reject 1505. So it seems to me that there's a lack of energy at the DOE, so to speak, in responding to 1505. It took 2 years to do that. I'd like to know why. Next slide. Why is this site so important not only to Pike County but to Jackson County to the west, Scioto County to the south? Is because this site in red, these are the groundwater monitoring areas. This is where the groundwater is contaminated. 160 acres of highly contaminated groundwater, pump and treat operations. A pump and treat operation is a way to contain. It is not a way to get rid of the source material. You're not going to get rid of trichloroethylene with a pump and treat type of operation. We're going to talk about that. The buildings, of course, in green are also subject to contamination and need to be remedied, and that's part of the plan that has been described. Next slide, please. Why is TCE such a bad actor? It's a carcinogen, number one. It's also what's called a DNAPL. It's a dense non-aqueous phase liquid that essentially sinks relative to water. So it keeps sinking. Then it is non-aqueous, which means that it's a solute. It doesn't dissolve and create a solution. So it very poorly dissolves, but when it does dissolve, it's highly toxic. So if you see where I point out where the Berea formation is, you see there's a B at the end of that monitoring location, and you see 2,000 parts per billion. The Safe Drinking Water Act maximum contaminant level for TCE is 5 parts per billion. We are 3 orders of magnitude higher than what the Safe Drinking Water Act is. Why is that important? Because according to CERCLA, the DOE is required, this site is being remedied under CERCLA record, which are essentially the same programs under the federal laws. You must clean up groundwater to its maximum permissible use. So containment's not going to work, and we need a firm commitment from the Department of Energy that they're going to remove the landfills so that they can get to the source material so that they can actually remedy the groundwater. We'd like that in writing. Now, it's in the Berea. The Berea is defined as a regionally confined aquifer. A confined aquifer is an aquifer that is confined at the top and at the bottom by impermeable material, generally material that doesn't readily allow water to flow through it. Hydraulic conductivity is what I'm talking about. But lo and behold, the Berea is already contaminated at the site. When we talk about the landfill, we're talking about a modeling effort that I'm going to share with you just in a few minutes that speaks to trying to avoid getting the Berea contaminated from the material that would be deposited in that landfill. We already have it in the Berea already. Next slide. So here are our concerns with regard to what has happened so far. We just believe that there were a lot of errors that were undertaken. There were perhaps some assumptions that were being made, and there have been statements made by the Department of Energy that say, yes, we made mistakes. We made mistakes that were misleading. We made mistakes with regard to they were abbreviated high-level summary statements, and we acknowledge such. And so we think that when you do misleading things and you have high-level types of statements that are abbreviated with regard to fracture, we have a young lady here in the audience who asked a very basic question. Is the bedrock fractured? And the answer was not below 20 feet. But then when you went to Appendix I of the report, over half or about half of the borings, 24 of them, were fractured below 20 feet. You can't have it both ways. You can't put in the document that it's not fractured and respond to a citizen and then have it in an appendix and say that it is. The fact of the matter is, it is. It's fractured at depth below 20 feet. Those are misleading statements. And we talked to the director of Ohio EPA and we said, look, we think that's misrepresentation. You should reopen the rod according to the code. not according to how we feel. It's what the law says. We want you to comply with the law. Next slide. There is a law, a federal law called the Toxic Substance Control Act. This act says it's very toxic material. When you have very toxic material, we want to have special protections. Those protections are there to avoid leakage into the environmental receptors. What are they talking about? They talk about a liner and a water table, not an aquifer. The water table. When you start drilling down, you hit water at some point. That may not be an aquifer of use, but it's the water table. TSCA doesn't want this material in any kind of interaction with water. Not the aquifer, not the debris aquifer. What is in the water? 50 feet from the liner bottom to the water. They also talk about no hydraulic connection between the site, standing, or flowing surface water. Next slide. Tell me that there isn't any connection between surface water and groundwater at this site. There are 56, these are not my words, this is their data. 56 groundwater seeps. What is a seep? It is groundwater discharging to surface water. I think that's a connection, and that's a violation of TSCA. You can't put a site here, it's in violation of TSCA. What does the Ohio EPA say? We're not regulating that. What does the United States Environmental Protection Agency say in letters on November 24th, 2017? What they say is, we're delegating that responsibility to DOE, and that there can be allowances. Allowances is another word for a waiver. They're asking for a waiver. This is not a good site. Anybody can look at this and say, 56 groundwater seeps, 22 streams. Next slide. Look at what you see here in these little boxes. That's the depth to groundwater. If you look at this, and it's hard to see, but here is a number 22, 10, 21. This is the depth from the land surface to the water table, not the aquifer, the water table. TSCA says from the bottom of the liner, 50 feet separation. They want it high and dry. We've got a site that has 10 feet below ground surface, you're hitting water. JD was talking about this area over here. This is where the landfill is being sited. It's not over here, it's over here. This is where all the fractures are. This is where all the shallow groundwater is. There's a distinction there. Next slide. Borrow pits. The code says you shouldn't build a landfill where a borrow pit was. Next slide. Here's where the borrow pits are. Pretty big, right? Guess where they put the landfill? Right next to the borrow pits. I don't think that's a good idea. This is not a solid waste landfill. This is a low-level nuclear waste landfill. We should not be trying to put a square peg in a round hole. That's what we're doing here. Thank you very much. Move on to the next slides, please. Continue.
Next one.
Continue. 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 Fractures in the bedrock. What we've been told is, folks at TFG, you got it wrong. You looked at these logs, and those logs are wrong. In fact, what was said in the previous slide that you all have in front of you is that the logs that were in the Appendix I are now generalized. In the first slide, what Director Butler said was that they were very detailed and accurate. So he's basically saying two things. He's saying they're detailed and accurate, and in the other slide, he's saying they're generalized. Not a good idea, Director Butler. Then what's also being said is we looked at some photographs that apparently became part of the administrative record about a month ago. And those photographs revealed to us that these logs are incorrect. Now, if you look at these logs, anybody can see that the level of detail that has been undertaken is at the inch level. I think they were very detailed. Now, what they also said that there was mechanical fractures. Well, if you look at the bottom arrow, it's a fluvial environment. Rivers go like this, right? They go back and forth. And so what happens in the cut bank, you get the high energy sand. And then if you go in the overflow bank, you get the silts, low energy clay, turns into shale. Well, if it was mechanical fracture, then why aren't they showing mechanical fractures in that boring log? You can't have it both ways. There are fractures I annotate there that are documented by FBP. I happen to agree with FBP. How about that? I agree with them. But you can't go back and rewrite history. So at the end, here's our recommendations for you as the Chillicothe City Council. Keep going forward, please. Keep going forward. Keep going forward. I'm not going to do the modeling. The modeling is incorrect because there are issues at play. And this is our request for you, and we can talk about that in the rebuttal session if that's appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, if you don't mind sharing the bench.
Come on in.
There's a couple of those people that are standing, maybe.
Standard operating procedure, and this place is for to allow these chairs by the rules. I think that's just really unbelievable, I'm just taking the time to do that, and make a mistake. I'm the one.
I want you to. I'm safe.
I'm too mean.
Let you sit, kind of get your thoughts together. And we'll move to a 5 minutes rebuttal to use as you need to either review any statements or additional information. So whenever you're ready, you let me know.
Yeah, I'm ready.
You ready?
Yeah, again, we heard some information that's not completely correct, okay? For example, no siting of landfill in borrow pit. The Ohio code is very clear what type of borrow pit, sand and gravel and quarry or stone. But those two areas shown by the previous slide you just saw, actually borrow pit for Milford clay. Because we use those clay material to build cover in those existing landfill. Okay, so the Ohio code is okay with that. And again, if we look at those boring logs, we actually have that, and when we collect the log, we actually calculate another term called RQD, rock quality designation. So fracture by itself doesn't trigger any regulations, so therefore it's unstable, therefore you cannot build a landfill there. It's a starting point for you to determine what's the rock quality and trigger point for you to do the test, hydraulic test, to show whether those fractures are connected or not. And if they are not connected, engineer can use those RQD to determine are they stable, are they competent rock or not. Even the fresh rock has those RQD, which is triggered by fracture. The RQD above 90% is considered fresh rock. And most of our rock below the weather zone are in that category. Okay? And let's keep going. And this figure here is figure 2.25 in the IFS. And by the way, this is the IFS main text. Not very big, okay? And section 2 summarizes all the hydrogeological information. And we summarize all the borings information because we know it took a lot of effort for people to read all the borings. So we summarize it in one figure. And that's our job, effectively communicate what we learned in the field. So we identify weather zone, we identify sea, stream, and 720 sandstone layer, 680 sandstone layer. We have joint in the sandstone, we have a bedding plane party in the sandstone. We summarize all that. The IFS main text itself, okay, talk about the fracture probably close to 100 times because we know people will have concern. So engineering study based on hydraulics test to prove whether they are vertically, horizontally connected or not. Geochemical test to see whether water have the same chemistry or not. All lead us to conclude that those fractures are not interconnected. They are isolated. And because of those RQD calculations, it also show those are not going to impact the stability of the facility. And all those seeds are less than 9 feet from ground surface. That means all the rainfall coming to this hill leave the ground surface either as a surface runoff or coming out from those seep locations within the top 9 feet, okay? And this hill has been there for 350 million years already. And the weather zone only went down about 20 feet. And it's so clear, if you, Jeff, if you go back to the boring picture there, next. Yeah, if you look at those boring, the weather zone and unweather zone are very, very clearly identified by color, because oxygen coming with rainwater will oxidize the iron content in the shale formation. So it's brownish type color. But below that, they are gray, or very dark gray, or even black. That means water never got there, so oxygen did not get there, and those fractures identified has no standing of those iron oxidation.
Yep,
So-
1 minute.
So water did not get that deep. All those got summarized, all those have photo evidence and included in our records. And let's keep going, Jeff. So we summarize this, and next. And this is the cross-section. As you can see, all those kind of depression areas showing this is the top of the hill. Rainwater coming, drain away very quickly, okay? But we are going to build a cover to replace those drainage pattern and allow even 2,000 year stone event to come in here and drain away from the cover with a surface with vegetation, protection, and drainage layer, and to allow the water to not coming into the contact of waste layer. Next. And then this is how the cells are built on top of existing ground and dig down to the competent rock, okay? And you can see in those low-lying areas where you may heard earlier the water is shallow, those are outside of OSWDF footprint. I mentioned earlier, inside the footprint, the distance is sufficient. And even, just come back to the TSCA, the only thing we can follow in EPA Region 5 is other permits that's already approved by US EPA. And at the time when we did this, there's one facility in Michigan, one facility in Illinois. US EPA go to the uppermost aquifer to identify the upper water table is. So
I don't
in
know
this
why
case,
it's
we
letting you
follow
do
it.
Your time's up. I'll give you
Yeah.
a second.
Okay. Thank you.
Half minute there. Okay.
Thank you.
So Jeff, you can hook me back up, Jeff? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Thanks for helping me out. Let me get the page before he starts signing.
Is this,
Let me get the right.
the clock's good?
Yeah, double click it.
You want it?
Let me get the right slide first. Which way am I going?
Take your
Going
time.
back.
Okay.
Keep going
I
back.
just want to make sure I get the right one before we start.
Okay, right there.
Right there?
Okay, so we talked about the fractures not being interconnected, that they're isolated. I want to read, so Director Butler at the bottom says, there are no siting criteria directly regarding the fractures that would prohibit placement of a waste disposal facility in the state of Ohio. I think we've got some legislation that we can enact now, can't we? Evidence exists that the fractures are isolated and not interconnected. Let me read to you from page 239 of the DOE RIFS. The southern area near piezometer 09C and piezometer 12C appears to be influenced by interconnected fractures, providing recharge and bedding plane partings and fractures within the 680-foot sandstone that allow greater transmissivity. Transmissivity is defined as hydraulic conductivity, the ability of fluid to pass through a media times the saturated bed thickness. What we have here is information that is refuting Director Butler. Director Butler apparently has not read the RIFS. Next slide. So where is PZ 09 and 012? Well, they're located where the landfill is going to be, in this area here. This is the area where there is high bedrock fractures all around here. This is also the area where the depth to groundwater is very shallow. And this is where it's interconnected and where the hydraulic conductivity is behaving like a sand. You don't want a landfill in a sandy environment. Imagine if you go to a beach, what happens when it rains? It soaks in pretty quickly. The hydraulic conductivity in this area of the site is 3 to 4 orders of magnitude higher than in other areas of the site. Let's move on to the groundwater modeling. Keep going.
You won't let me go. Help me out, Jeff. This ain't a DOE computer. It is. But anyway, it's got some lock on it. Older time it's a DOE computer. Help me out.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Go to the modeling. Keep going. Stop. Go to stop. One more. All right, so this is a model. There were 2 models that were used, and this is very important. The models are used to develop what's referred to as the waste acceptance criteria, what is allowed to be put in that landfill. So you use a model to calculate out what the appropriate concentration of material is that would go in that landfill, leach in to meet a receptor. The STOMP model, as you can see above, is for the cover area, waste, regolith, shale, shale, shale. And then you have the ModFlow with the regional model, and it has regolith, Cuyahoga, Cuyahoga, Cuyahoga. Now you have in front of you a better color representation. There are 4 different colors. What's important is, if you noticed all the different sample locations that occurred at the on-site waste disposal facility, they were all at the on-site waste disposal facility. They weren't out in Timbuktu. Why? This is a site that is a greenfield. There's no reason to sample outside of that area. They wanted to know what was going on in that site. So, if the data is coming from the on-site waste disposal facility, then the hydraulic conductivity values for those 4 layers should be the exact same number. Because it's the same location, it's the same rock, it should have the same hydraulic conductivity, but guess what? The numbers are different. The numbers are different. So if the modeling is incorrect in the baseline modeling, if the modeling is incorrect, then the waste acceptance criteria must be revisited. You can do a sensitivity analysis. Let me give you an example. Let's say the regolith is 5. We just call it 5. And then we say, what is the model going to do when we make it 50? And what is the model going to do when it's 0.5? That's a sensitivity analysis. That's perfectly legitimate. What is not legitimate is making up numbers that are different for the same location at the same formation to develop waste acceptance criteria from a modeling that isn't correct. There are a number of these misrepresentations or just plain errors that resulted in the production of a report that is going to lead to one of the most important decisions in this area of the country, the placement of a low-level nuclear waste landfill. Let me end with this. Was there any other place, other than on the plant property, that they could have looked for a better site? I would suggest to you this was pre-decisional. There was a movement to find a site where they own, within their fence line, that they could control, and then they back-calculated out the results to get what they wanted. And guess what? Unfortunately, the data doesn't support them, and the good people of the village of Piketon, 2,000 people, have expended their capital treasury because they're concerned about their future. We want you to be concerned about their future as well. We ask you to support a resolution in support of the village of Piketon. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That gives both sides equal opportunity to present their presentations, their case. At this time, we'll move to discussion with our council. Or questions from council people to anybody that's, if you have any questions.
I don't have a question, but as a chairperson of Community Affairs, I would like to thank both groups for presenting this information tonight. It's been very informative, and I hope that as a council member that we will be able to look at this information objectively and make our decision based on what, not just what we feel, but also what we have had an opportunity to take in tonight. I also would like for us to think in terms of that I am my neighbor's keeper. And my neighbor is beyond my next door person,
Yes.
person that lives to me. I think it is important for us to know that we have received more information about a topic than any resolution that I've ever been involved in. And
Oh, yeah.
this is not my first time at the rodeo. I was on council in 1980, 20, for years. So
30.
I would like to commend you all for bringing us this information. Information is powerful, but I think we have to also understand the reality of what this decision really is. This is not something that we can take back tomorrow once that is there. But it's something that our children's children have to deal with. And also whether or not that particular area in terms of their land and what have you will ever be able to be used. And yes, I do go to Byton. So it does mean something to me. I do have a cat or a dog or whatever you call it in this fight because our environment depends on it. So I just want to, thank you for this because it took a lot to bring all this together. And I would like to thank our president for following through with this and helping us to get this information. So no matter which way the council decides that we should vote or what have you, you'll know one thing is that we have gathered a lot of information. And I'm more intelligent about it today than I was the day you walked in here. And I appreciate that for you. In fact, I was almost afraid to say, can I do this? Can I even look at this and read this? But I found myself being able to do that. And that means a lot in my decision. So thank you, President O.
No problem. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah.
One of the things that Piketon has asked us to support is the reopening of the RID. What would that accomplish? What would happen if that was reopened?
The reopening of the what back?
Of the record system?
If I may, the reopening of a rod is something that is allowable under the federal Superfund program. The site is being regulated under that program.
Even though it's not a super.
That's exactly correct. That's how many of these sites are being regulated, and that's part of the problem. It shouldn't be regulated under Superfund. Superfund deals with the sins of the past. This is a greenfield site, but nevertheless, we're stuck with that. Reopening the rod means re-looking at what was the proposed remedy, and if there in fact are other approaches that should be advocated for.
So it would basically just be starting at ground zero, is that right?
I don't think it's going to be starting at ground zero. There's a tremendous amount of data that's been collected, both with regard to the on-site question, as well as with regard to the off-site option. So there might be a need to collect more data, perhaps in terms of what might be an off-site variant of what was proposed. There might be perhaps some discussion of what might be a more robust landfill than what is being perceived of based upon the hydrogeologic conditions that exist now. There is a problem. The problem is there's water everywhere, and you shouldn't be putting stuff where there's a lot of water.
Thank you.
You need to know what the process of opening the rod is.
Yeah, I just like to also add an opinion
Sure.
from the.
No, I'm still.
Stand up.
Yeah, just stand up. You don't have to come up and you can
So
talk from there.
I would say I don't want to speculate what that means. We have a decision in place. We have incorporated that in our plan to complete, our environmental mission at the site. I would say don't underestimate or don't downplay what effects that could have, because it's a big deal. It took us almost 5 years to get to where we got, okay? And so the site is regulated under both RCRA and CERCLA, and that was some of the reasons we couldn't make a commitment from the CERCLA regulation over to the RCRA regulation. We've been working with Ohio EPA for the past 18 months, once we got the record of decision in play, to then come up with some legal vehicle which we can overreach from the CERCLA side in the cleanup cell and reach down into those RCRA decisions that were made to get the contaminated material out of those and put it in the outside disposal site. We follow the law, as I'm sure you guys can appreciate that. And it is not a simple thing to go through and interpret something that doesn't necessarily have a clear precedence or clean precedence on it. We work very hard with Ohio EPA. We're very close to having that order issued from the director, in which case then I believe we'll be able to fully commit to all the recommendations from the SSAB. We've been through this process, and just because we don't get it today doesn't mean that we sit down and quit working towards it. So to answer your question, don't underestimate the impact changing our plan for the site would have on the site and our ability to commit to progress and cleanup activities to people who brought us money to do that.
Mr. Bradburn, a follow-up question to that? Sir. No, that's absolutely okay. We have the same first name, it's great. So as of now, my question to you is, there is nothing that says the plumes, which were part of the plan as presented, there is no permission to actually go into said plumes and clean them out currently.
That is correct. We have remedies on the books that we are bound to follow. And for the plumes, we have pump and treat remedies. In some case, we work to do other remedies. We go and evaluate those with Ohio EPA on their viableness. For the landfills, those have been closed. We monitor all this stuff. We have people on site that's their job, is to take care of these things, to monitor the groundwater, to pump and treat those remedies that we have in place, to examine and inspect the landfills that are closed. We go through a 5-year annual review. I believe the landfills, the majority were done, 2013 was the last, and they're coming up for another review. So we're very well regulated. Those under RCRA have been completed, and we have remedies in place, and it just takes a long time to extract, that contaminant out of the environmental medium.
And I understand that, and I don't mean to press, but I just wanted to make that established, that there is a distinct possibility that there will be no permission, correct?
So, with on-site disposal, I feel pretty confident in saying, because of the work that we've done with Ohio EPA, that we will get that permission. And it's not 18 months in the future. We've been working hard, and I don't want to jinx it by saying it'll be tomorrow, but it's imminent, and they understand that it's part of our remedy, and it will be in place to allow us to mobilize. As a matter of fact, the contractor's already working on plans to mobilize to go after the first excavation, so which coincides with what we've been demolition.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question in reference to the local jobs that talked about. And there were two alternatives just from reading that you were looking at, first off-site and then on-site. Now, from looking at this information, it seems that either alternative would not increase or reduce the number of jobs at Piketon. Is that correct?
No, ma'am, that's not.
Okay.
All right, and I will start with the premise that we get, as I mentioned, we get about $450 million a year from the federal government to do our work at the site. And that includes the cleanup of the gaseous diffusion plant and operation of the UF6 facility. And the majority of that goes to pay for salaries. Okay? If we were to take an alternative that the primary objective was to ship the majority of that material off-site for disposal, that would increase, you might imagine, that portion of that site funding that pays for jobs today. There would be a portion of that that gets reduced from salaries that would have to pay for the cost of transport and dispose and or treat as part of that operation. And so it's,
Let me read directly from a report that I've received. Local jobs have a positive impact on the surrounding economy. However, the remediation jobs, regardless of which alternative is selected, would not notably increase totally Portsmouth jobs over current levels. And that's direct quote that's in the report.
I believe the RIFS, if you look at the labor hours for one alternative and the labor hours for the other alternative, the two are quite different.
Now, I understand exactly what you're saying, but this is an exact quote that came.
If I may, there is a process for what we call appropriations. We do that as well every year. That appropriation process is handled through the Congress and the administration. That's where the funds get directed. And I think that your good senators, Portman and Brown, understand that very well. And I know that they wouldn't want to lose any jobs. So if there's going to be a change, I think they should have a say in what's going on as well. And I'm sure that they wouldn't want to have money redirected that would result in job losses. There would have to be some type of process in place, an effective transition, if you will.
One of, I guess my questions, I don't have too many technical questions because most of this is right over my head. I can get a little bit of it, but for me to challenge anyone, and so I feel like sometimes we're kind of in a bad spot right here because we don't live this, eat it, breathe it, do it every day, even though these are our brothers and sisters. But a lot of the brothers and sisters in this room also reside in Ross County and are, are employed there, or, I've had neighbors talk to me. To be honest, I don't have a sense of outrage. I don't, from other than the majority of the people in this room that have been here. I haven't seen the people from Piketon, up here in droves. So that concerns me a little bit. I want to do what I think they want you to do, and they as the general public, but not everybody always has all the information. There was 15 months, I think, is what we were told that there was conversations that went on that were available to the public, correct? What's that, 15, or what was the amount of time?
So that was just specifically for the Ports Future initiative that we started in 2011, and then we carried on in addition to that. So our public outreach efforts, so we can talk specifically about the CERCLA process, but we've gone above and beyond the requirement. We want to be good neighbors as well.
So one of my questions is that, and and some of this because we've got a lot of paperwork tonight that we've never seen. So it's, kind of hard to grasp all that and think about the questions I had before this. But I guess one of my questions, to all of you, is that somewhere something went awry, and I'm not always sure that, because I've been given misinformation from what I've gathered, and sometimes people speak out of emotion and passion, and just like supposedly the DOE puts things in reports that aren't correct, I've had some things that have been said here, I've gone and evaluated them, and they weren't correct. That's okay, that does not bother me. But it doesn't mean that I was given correct information. But there was the 4,000 page, then there was your study, and nobody agrees with me on this. I still would like a third study of something that's not involved with any of you at all. I would feel much better about that. So I guess, my question is, has this all been done in front of your community? The way you're doing it in front of our community? I mean, between your group, you know, and how many people attended there, and it's just, you know,
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're
Your
welcome.
questions are very good, your statements are very well founded. So here are the groups that have endorsed reopening the ROD in
Right.
Pike County. We're now in Ross County, we've been to Jackson County and going to Scioto County as well. The Pike County Health Department is on record supporting reopening the ROD. Of course, the Village of Piketon, the Scioto Valley Local School District, we went to each one of these organizations. The Seal Township, the City of Waverly is here. Pike County Career Technology Center. The Pike County Auditor has gone on record in support of reopening the ROD, and the Pike County Treasurer. The Pike County Commissioners have decided to put a hold. They had supported, and they received new information, and they put it on hold. Why is this coming to a head? Remember, we talked about SSAB 1302, and we
Right.
talked about SSAB 1505. 1302 said, reluctantly, we endorse the on-site waste disposal facility if you meet those criteria. Then the record of decision came out in 2014, and it did not address the concerns in 1302. So what did the Site-Specific Advisory Board do? It rescinded their endorsement of the on-site waste disposal facility in 2015. That's called 1505. It then took 2 years for DOE to respond to that, to say, we reject your recommendation of 1505. The Village of Piketon has been against this landfill from the beginning. In fact, in your packet, there is a letter back in 2009 from the federal delegation, the senators at the time, saying, we don't think it's a good idea either. There has been tremendous concern about having a low-level nuclear waste landfill for a long time. What we were asked to do, the Ferguson group, was to take a look at it from a technical perspective. And what we found were inconsistencies. And when we brought those inconsistencies up, we were told, yes, misleading statements, too generalized, inaccuracies. And tonight we've given you some more what we believe are misrepresentations. When you can't do a do-over. When you want to present yourself a plan before the general public, you have to get it right the first time. If you don't get it right the first time, you've got to go and fix, because this is the approval of the plan. What we've heard is, well, you know, the borings that FPP were logging as they were drilling, and they were writing it down, that's not good. There were photographs. Well, we're going to look at those photographs and we're going to rewrite history, revisionist history. That's not the way to go about it. And so that's disingenuous to the general public. And by the way, I was a local government official, and that is a tremendous responsibility. State government, federal government, we can do better, and we need to do better at this site.
Can I say something, answer your question?
sure, absolutely.
Well, I don't know if you recall,
I know who
I'm
you
the
are.
mayor.
Yeah, absolutely.
To answer your question about, we've had several meetings like this, and we've had standing room only crowds, so the support's there. I don't do like they do out on plant site, you know, when they send out when they got a meeting like this, they send out an email to everybody and say, oh, everybody should pack into the meeting tonight. Those emails go out to the plant employees, but I don't do that in Piketon. Start with, I don't have everybody that lives in Piketon's email address, but we have a meeting, and if we advertise it, it's packed. It's, I mean, standing room only, and that's, I just wanted the support's there, the tremendous support. If you wanna have another meeting, I'll bring 500 people with me, you know, so, that's no problem.
We'll have to get a bigger room.
Well, that's where we're at. I mean, our
want
building,
people.
And get a better
We can
our
bring
building
people.
is
Just
only
haven't
church.
seen it, and I haven't seen it.
Mentioning meetings and crowds, I've had this guy, looking up here, I've had this curiosity question. By show of hands, could could the audience show me who is actually in Ross County? Lives in this county? Okay, and who came up from Pike County?
And who works at the plant?
Well, yeah, okay. I was just curious, as to how many people we had from our own local area, showing interest in it.
Ms. Corbett, if I may,
Sure.
I'm Tracy Lamberson, I've been here a couple times before. I just wanna say that it's really come to a head at this point in time. I've lived there all my life. I've been very involved in the community, I volunteer a lot, I taught in the community, up until I came up to Unionda 4 years ago. And, all of the advertisement that I ever heard for these meetings about the plant were based on employment and cleanup. I never once out in the public heard, oh, hey, they're gonna put a nuclear dump in your backyard. Or I would have been there at that meeting. I would have been there, but it was employment, it was cleanup. I didn't work there, so I didn't feel like it was, that I needed to be there. Obviously, I should have been there, but that wasn't what was advertised. So when I heard in February, that's what was going on, that's when the Waverly Village Council, we scheduled a plant tour. We got a 2-hour tour, by the way. I heard you guys got a 4-hour tour. But that's when we started to become really concerned and started to really research this issue. And then in August, we just said, we have to do something fast because, you know, and once we started our work, they started working around the clock, trying to spend that money, trying to get that dirt dug so that the people in our community thought that there was no backtracking, thought that it couldn't be stopped. So that's how I feel as a citizen, and not an expert in this area, but that's how I feel and why it's all of a sudden blown up just in the past couple months.
Can I add something? As an employee there and a fence line neighbor, this is the letter that they sent out to everybody saying that they were proposing an on-site waste disposal cell. Nowhere in there does it say anything about that. In 2012.
We kind of have.
And honestly, as the closest house to the proposed on-site waste disposal cell, I didn't even receive that in the mailbox. I had to ask for it.
Can I speak as a member of one of the only person in this room
Well, we
that
really haven't gotten
recommended
into audience
to-
participation. At this point, we're really trying to have council people have a discussion and asking questions. If it's pertinent to something that's been asked, sure, that's okay. Is it?
Yes, it is,
Okay.
because I am the only person in this room. DOE at the time was different, EPA was different, I was one of the original board members. I'm the guilty party that said, we have these old landfills out here. And I can remember Marie Galante, if you worked out there, she was a 17-year EPA veteran, and she knew that site. And in that room, and it was a subcommittee meeting, so it was just a small group of people that had decided to be on the future use. And we knew the community kept telling us industrialize. And I was there when we sent out notices in the newspaper, notices on the radio, and it was one of the things we had to do as a board member, and we wanted your input. Everybody's from several counties, we wanted to hear, what did you want to do? But the look on Maria's face when I said, Maria, what are we going to do with the landfills? How does this work into the program? Because at the time, my understanding was, well, if you're going to industrialize, you have to pull the plumes, you have to pull the landfills. And the look on her face was like, she was trying to guide us and say, because she couldn't give us direction, because this was our community. The look on her face was, you asked the right question. We don't have to do anything with those landfills because they're a done deal and they're signed by the EPA, state of Ohio. And I look at them now and I think, if we buried them, and this is also somebody that worked at the hematite site as a regulatory engineer that helped clean up the landfills at the hematite site. If we buried them in 50s and 60s technology, and we actually found a Studebaker in the landfill at the hematite site, then if we can move this and put it someplace better, you know, it shouldn't that be our goal? I want to industrialize and bring jobs to my community. I've said that. And to us, if it was a give and take, that's why we made the decision. If you clean up the landfills for us, the communities, we feel, and we talk to the community, we were representing the community, but we'll take the on-site disposal cell so you can clean this up, and it would be more cost-effective than I think the last figure I saw was loading a train of dirt, and I can tell you the process, and I can tell you how it works. $23,000 for a caboose of dirt. So we knew with that information, that's why it was gonna be, we felt a win-win for us. I said, I live in this area too.
I understand exactly what you mean and what you're saying, but we can't put a price on a life. And I don't know anything about theology, but I do know that in the state of Michigan, people were told one thing and something else happened. So therefore, I think we all have to think and be careful in terms of the decision that we make, because when I hear 1 million years, things, I want to know, how do you calculate that? How do you know? I bought a battery for my fire alarm, and it said, will last until 2021. 2017, I had to get another one.
So you buy that back?
And so the man said to me, he said, oh, they just put that on there as an estimate. So I understand and appreciate, what you're saying.
Mr. Almond, you got the former president of SSAB right there, Will Henderson. He was there when these things were signed. He's here tonight.
Beth, did you have something to discuss? Bring up?
I just wonder, and I guess I'd like to ask the question, if the plumes were cleaned up, if the landfills were cleaned up, is that an acceptable compromise to the people in Piketon?
Who's from Piketon? Who's from Piketon? I am. I'll say.
We don't want the on-site disposal.
I understand that.
No.
I understand you don't. But at one time, you said if certain conditions were met.
The SSAB said
Yes.
that they would support on-site waste disposal if certain conditions were met.
Right.
Those conditions were never met, and they haven't been met today.
But what I'm saying is if those conditions were met,
If the plumes
Yes.
and the landfills
yes,
were completely cleaned up,
yes,
and put in the on-site waste disposal cell.
Yes.
We find that unacceptable.
unacceptable.
The very dirt and what's in those landfills is worse probably than what they're even wanting to bury.
So it's not just the nuclear waste you object to, it's all the fill and all the toxic.
All the toxic chemicals, all the asbestos, all the PCBs, all that, that's all going in there. They don't talk about that, but that's all going in there. That has an unlimited numerical waste acceptance criteria. And I'll talk about it during the opening in public, but, ma'am.
So my understanding, and I need some help with this, is that the low-level radiation that is, or the low-level uranium is not the issue.
Well, low level, low level. I don't, that guy's a genius that come up with that term. Let's sell it as a low level, it's
What is the guideline? I mean, we're saying that there's
0.03.
0.03%.
Well, I'll tell you some of that, and that's many. That's one of the most misleading figures that they have. Those 30,000 plus cylinders that they're talking about that's out there right now.
Right.
Yeah, they're saying they're going to get rid of them. They are going to get rid of them.
Right.
But they're using that as in that figure of we're shipping out 99.7%. So that's a tremendous amount of material there in that, but it's a misleading figure. the .3 that they wanna use, I guess by their calculations, the .3 is the rest of the plant, you know, and, it's just not right. Those cylinders, as I understand it, pardon me, that was always in the plan to go. They're building facilities out there to clean them up, so.
Ms. Neal, your question goes to, would the village support 1302?
Right.
The problem is that placement of the waste in that location is not appropriate.
Placement of the cleanup material from the plumes and the dump sites into that cell
Correct.
is not appropriate. It doesn't meet what you think.
It's full of water. It's not a good site. You don't want to be putting hazardous waste and low-level nuclear waste in an area where you've got 56 groundwater seeps, 22 streams, half the area is fractured bedrock, and the depth to groundwater is 9 and 10 feet and 20 feet. It makes no good sense to put it there. The reason you have low-level nuclear and hazardous waste out in Nevada is because the water table is hundreds of feet below grade. It's high and dry and nobody lives there. That's why you do that. This makes no sense. This isn't even close.
I've asked this question before, and I'm anxious to hear your answer. I've heard that the disposal cell cannot fail, and we all know that
Yes.
we've heard hundreds of times something
Right.
can't happen,
Right.
and it does.
Right.
So I'd like to ask you the question: if that fails,
Yes.
what happens?
The contamination will find its way probably to surface water, which will eventually discharge to the Scioto River. So the contaminants could impact fisheries. Fish will absorb the nuclear material. What is the best example of this? I happen to have the great opportunity to work on other nuclear waste sites. I'm the consultant, not the lobbyist, the consultant for the Oak Ridge, the city of Oak Ridge, the secret city. They have a low-level nuclear waste landfill that was built on fractured bedrock, and there was tremendous amount of rain. Remember, it's the Smoky Mountains, and guess what happened? The landfill failed, and therefore they had to do a retrofit, and there is still contamination leaving that landfill cell. That site is in formal dispute because DOE wants to build, guess what? Another landfill next to the one that they already built. We should not do this. It's called insanity. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, and it's the wrong answer.
Do you think that, I keep trying to think, have we done this before? And is Oak Ridge, is that something that you think is a fair comparison
Yes.
to the site of Oak Ridge?
Oak Ridge is actually a worse site. Oak Ridge has buggy cores, they've got fractured bedrock, and they have an example that has failed that had to be retrofit. We are seeing at Oak Ridge what may occur here, and I don't want it to occur here. Nobody wants anybody to fail. What we want is to be done right. That's what we want. And if it's done right, we all will celebrate a victory. But right now, the science, the engineering, in my opinion, as a professional geologist, since 1993, it has not been done to the standard that we should expect of a low-level nuclear and hazardous waste landfill. This is not where you put your garbage. This is a special landfill, and it deserves special protection. We can't do a do-over. It has to be done right. It has to have extra protection. This is not a good site.
You deserve full answer and correct information, so I feel I need to clarify a few things there. Okay. We keep hearing about water everywhere, but in my presentation, I was trying to show the portion of the environment underlying geology that have those seep and those weather conditions will all be removed. And I emphasize that the liner will be built on competent bedrock. Okay, so those seeds and those shallow material will be removed. And it's not just 20 feet excavation. Some of the area we actually need to go down 60 feet. So find the best location, not just what DOE decides the best location. Actually, ODNR, Department of Natural Resources, actually have a color-coded map for the entire county and for every county. So for ODNR, they start with saying, okay, within Pike County, and then we look into this particular site. That is the best location. And when we went in there, studied for 4 more years, identified all those issues, seed, stream, and barrel condition, and faithfully recorded in the field. What the IFS present in the appendix is a kind of computerized form. That's why some of the information did not get put in there, like those rock quality designation that actually tell you, is that fresh rock, hard rock, or actually weathered rock? And that's what engineering need to base their decision on. And about landfill, we excavate the landfill and plume. They also need to follow waste acceptance criteria, which is not unlimited, okay? Like I say, our third decision is to determine what is safe to put in there for at least 1,000 years, okay? So if there's anything from the landfill that's unacceptable based on those criteria, also need to go off-site. So at the end, it's a much better condition for the whole site. We have best location, engineering, design, construction to replace those water everywhere type of condition. And US EPA, both Region 4 and Region 5, are on-site in November to look at what we did. And they walk away without issues, okay? So it's not just what DOE is doing, or DOE and Ohio EPA. US EPA Region 4 and 5, 2 regions that cover 10 states, were here and specifically look at TSCA issue, okay? And after that, they issued a letter to the village of Python. So headquarters look at this very, very carefully. And they did not just give me 15 minutes for presentation. They sit me down and listen to me for 24 hours, okay? In 8 presentations, week after week after week. Start from, what did you study? What that study tell you what's at the site? And therefore, what's your engineering design? How do you model it? What's the modeling result tell you what is safe to put in there, okay? Then how are you going to monitor the performance of it? And how are you going to maintain all those assumptions, all those constraints during the whole operation? And only after that, they say, okay, continue your design and continue your construction. However, when we are ready to operate, they still need to come back to look at all our operational plan to say, in the short term, when you are doing the operation, when you are excavating, when you are placing waste, is it going to be safe, okay? And also, headquarters is fully aware, they need to solve the problem for the whole site. They cannot just look at building by itself. We have building, we have landfill, we have plume, we have those DU F6 cylinders. It is part of the overall challenge, and they need to have an overall solution. And that's why we present 99.7% of the curie or radioactive inventory need to go outside, because we don't feel it's right to put it at this location. However, within all those buildings, their contamination spread out on the structure or in the equipment. That just cannot be isolated, so can be shipped out easily. So it's a huge volume. However, from a contamination standpoint, it's small. Just again, what we put in there compared to Fano. Fano is another site that actually got complete and have actual performance data to show they are not leaking. The actual concentration in our disposal facility, even is sitting on a much better geological condition. It's only half of what we have at Fano in the outside disposal facility.
Say that again. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Okay, Fano is already complete,
Right.
right?
Right.
The concentration of uranium within the Fano outside disposal facility is twice higher than what we end up with our onsite disposal facility at Portsmouth. Okay, so it's a much better geological condition, even that we have higher waste acceptance criteria. However, what we put in there is actually 5 order of magnitude lower than what we say can be put in there and still safe. So that's how careful we are.
Well,
And
JD,
at the end, it's actually about half of what we put in.
JD, what about Fernald?
Fernald.
Fernald, though, is some of the material Fernald, it's a phyton, right? The highly toxic stuff from Fernald.
Most of the inventory
It's still a phyton.
already shipped outside. The uranium
I just wanted to
management
make sure.
center is already empty. And again, on the modeling, okay, it's very, very critical, the modeling that you heard all around. The fact is, the 2 models that you heard, STUM model, MAFLO, are developed for 2 different things. The STUM model is to simulate the disposal facility itself and go through all those unsaturated zones because it's a hill, no groundwater table, and we need to have a model that can simulate those type of conditions. MAFLO, on the other hand, can only simulate saturated water table aquifer. So we reserve that model to simulate Berea. If the STUM model actually project any contaminant get into Berea, then MAFLO start simulating the Berea sandstone to further out. The STUM model is very local, and like what you heard, MAFLO is a regional model. Unfortunately, the STUM model project the contaminant cannot get to Berea sandstone aquifer. That is the aquifer underneath the OSWDF because it's under pressure, okay? And also, it has many layers that have very, very low permeability and also very good geochemical barrier property. That means contaminant cannot go through it. It will stuck to the matrix, the soil, the shell. And water cannot go through because the Berea has a 15 feet of hydraulic pressure trying to push out, okay? All those give up a waste acceptance criteria far exceed what we actually plan to put in there, okay? So we look at that as a safety factor. We are not saying it's unlimited, therefore we put everything there. No, instead we ship 99.7% offsite because we don't want to handle those type of material. And at the end, the concentration in the OSWDF is only half of what we put in it for no. And also you can hear that, oh, this is only 1,007 feet from the nearest neighbor. In reality, DOE headquarters has a requirement saying that we need to prove it will be protected if somebody live only 300 feet from the waste, okay? Inside the tow actually waste 300 feet. So all our modeling, including waste acceptance criteria, prove we need to be protected at 300 feet. So any work beyond that is much, much more protected. And there's a scenario we say somebody living right next to the cell, okay, after it's closed, using groundwater, using surface water, and right next to the cell. Is the person or the family going to be safe? The conclusion is still they are going to be safe. So there are a lot of result, a lot of effort, field study, modeling, engineering put together. So I cannot summarize all that in less than 15 minutes, okay? So I hope you don't
But he
look at
tried in 30.
the lack of completeness in our response today as we did not really evaluate everything.
Okay, kind of getting off our questions. The discussion is really supposed to be for council people to be asking people in the audience, unless you're directing.
I am directing.
Okay, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think what she was originally trying to ask, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, was, you know, I believe in conversations that I've heard that the plumes are not going to be cleaned up if that site isn't there, because that is the intent for those plumes to go into that fill. So would the trade-off to have this, and am I asking this what you were trying to say? Would the trade-off be if the plumes were cleaned up, would that be a good solution versus if that site doesn't exist, the plumes are not being cleaned up at all?
So the thing that is
Am I
missing,
right, Ben?
what you're missing is the federal law. The federal law doesn't care about a negotiated settlement. The federal law says this: the polluter, you must clean up the groundwater to its maximum permissible use, period. That's the standard. So if it doesn't go into the on-site waste disposal facility, the good folks at DOE have to do their job. That's the law, they must comply. Now, with regard to EPA Region 4 and Region 5 and TSCA, we have the letter from EPA to the Mayor Spencer, dated October 25. It's just not credible what's being said. I'm going to read you 2 paragraphs. Because ports is not on the national priority list, Ohio EPA rather than US EPA has lead for oversight of DOE response actions. As such, the US EPA does not have an oversight role under CERCLA with respect to DOE compliance with TSCA. Both DOE and Ohio EPA maintain that the landfill design is and remain protective of human health and the environment. We encourage the village, DOE, and Ohio EPA to keep an open dialogue when discussing the landfill design and TSCA regulatory requirements. I don't think that said that they endorsed anything about the TSCA requirements. Basically, what US EPA did in a football terminology is 4th down, punt.
Council members,
I don't necessarily have a question, just as much as some thoughts on this. I said, I will say that it would have been nice to got some university credit for the amount of geology that I've had to learn about. It's been a while since I was in college. I did take some geology classes. Not apparently nearly enough. But I don't think it's really up on us to be junior geologists, and I think that we can accept some of this information, process some of this information, it adds to it, but I don't think that's necessarily where we need to invest the most of our time. I also don't think that it's our place to play let's make a deal, since we don't actually have any power to make a deal. It'd be nice to say, that there's a middle ground, that there's a happy answer to this, and gee shucks, it'd be nice if we could be a part of it. But the reality is, this is going to come down between, the local area, the people of this area, and the government. It's not going to be that we broker the deal, although we may reap the benefits of it or the dividend. My thought is, we're talking about this. Well, is this? It's only 0.3. It's only just tiny a bit of this, and that makes it okay. And in my mind, I got thinking, I was like, okay, well, our big problem here, you guys in Piketon may be aware, we're sometimes in the news for heroin. Would that, just a little bit of heroin be okay? Would that be our acceptable terms if we were dealing with a problem? That, well, it's just a little bit of heroin. It's not a lot of heroin.
Just a
so
few deaths.
We know it's dangerous, but it's only a small amount of Getting into how bad is this for you? Is this going to give me cancer, or just maybe a little skin cancer? Is this going to be pancreatic? This kind of stuff is just impossible to weigh out. My other thing is, we talk about this. It looks like they put, and I guarantee they put a lot of time, energy, and effort, and they're not trying to build something that is going to intentionally hurt people. The Star Company did the same thing with the Titanic. Their intent was good. Something bad happened. Was it human error? Was it act of God? But those things can happen. What I find troubling is, with this information on both sides, yes, there's some give and take. But what I hear tonight is that, well, yes, there's problems with the site, but if we completely rebuild the site, well, then it's okay. So where does that leave us? Well, I don't think the question is, how how do we, as a council here in Chillicothe, tell engineers how to build a toxic waste dump? We don't have the knowledge. We can't begin to understand the levels of detail. But the question is, do we want simply a toxic waste dump of any kind
Nuclear waste.
near us? If the answer is no, we pass a resolution saying we oppose a site with on-site storage. If we are okay with some level, be it a small amount or a large amount at this point, then we pass no resolution and let them go on their merry way. But I think that we spend a lot of time talking about a lot of detail that probably really doesn't affect what we're going to be able to do anyway. All we can offer with a resolution is nothing binding. The state's not going to say, well, Chillicothe ruled on this and so it must be. If that was the case, we would got a lot more that local funding back a few years ago. But it is important to our neighbor that we show them either we are for them and that we support their desire not to have this, or we stay out of it and allow them to handle their own business. That's how I see this. We could stand here and we could listen, as you say, for 24 hours a session and listen to all this. Detail. It could be very educational. I've learned a heck of a lot. I love looking at the model. I just, think that stuff's great. But it's not getting us any further down the field on making a decision that's actually meaningful. The only thing we have is, are we okay with this? If we are, let's, let the people of Piketon get on to convincing people that will take their side in this fight. Or we agree that we are against any type of site there that is going to continue to be a problem for Piketon and possibly, ourselves in the future. And those are my thoughts.
Anybody else? Yes.
Sitting here and I'm listening. I've gotten a big education on all this, but to me it just comes down to the simple fact, would we want this in our backyard? And is there a guarantee it won't leak? No, there's not. And am I willing to put the future of my kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, whatever, on the line for something that's, things happen. There's no guarantee in life. And this is probably the most important decision as a council person that you'll make. I've been doing this for almost 14 years now, and this is, I thought the meth legislation was important, but something like this could really, if it would leak, would be harmful, for everybody. We talk about economic development. It would shoot it in the foot. So just good luck.
I got just a little bit to add, and it's kind of relevant to this. I've been trying to educate myself, most of what I've been reading is kind of over my comprehension, kind of like Mr. Kroll said. I did take a glaciation class in college as well. And I did it actually for an easy grade back then. I did. I tried to look at Tays Valley. I tried to look at aquifers. I tried to look at all kinds of stuff. I've been Googling for the last week.
Good.
And then I had another situation that I was making some phone calls around to different councils, and lo and behold, I came up with the guy that is the president of the city council in Lancaster, Ohio. And I'm looking at the screen and I'm reading his bio here, and I called him on a completely different subject. It had nothing to do with this whole thing, this matter. And I find out he graduated in 1972 with a master's degree in hydrogeology. And I saw that while I was talking to him, and I said, hey, we've kind of got a contentious thing going on down here in our area, but this Piketon facility and storage of storage, and I said people are concerned about contamination and ground contamination. I said they're worried that the Tays Valley is going to be bringing this right up to our city. And before I even called him, I pretty well found out, and of course he talked to me in layman's terms, which was really good. So I understood what things he was saying. And he says, well, there's no Taze Valley River anymore. I said, that's kind of what I've been finding. He said, yeah. He said, when the glaciers came down, he said, basically it plugged it up. And he said that nothing flows north. He said, it's impossible. He said, you can't make water flow north or uphill. He said, from your city, pretty well, it flows south, little bits left. He said, there isn't enough water in there. And I grew up as a kid, all these years, hearing that we're getting our water from Taze Valley. That's why it's so clear and so perfect and so good. And he said, no, he said there's very little water there. He said maybe enough for some houses and farms, but he said there's not enough water in that Taze Valley to be able to supply a city. He said that the Taze Valley is mainly sand and silt. Water doesn't flow through it very well. It doesn't have much rock in it, so it has very little movement. He did confirm, and I heard talking in earlier this evening, that we do get our water from the Brea sandstone is our source. But he says you wouldn't be getting anything from either the Taze or the side aquifer. This was the interesting thing, and I actually even called him back today, and because I didn't think I heard him right. He said underground aquifers move roughly about 9 feet a year. And I said, really? And I called him back today to find that out. He said, yep. He said 5 to 20 feet is the averages, but he said about 9 feet a year. He said it may flow quicker moving into like a well, but he says you couldn't have a well big enough to suck water 20 miles. So I did put that on my calculator, and I did a calculation for with his back, and this guy's got a master's degree. This is what he's done for 46 years. It'd take 11,733 years for contamination in an aquifer to flow 20 miles. So just wanted to share that with you. It's got semi relevance, and I did talk to a guy that was very credible on that. That's all I got to say. Council, do you have anything else to ask questions about?
No, the only thing I would say is that I wish that, I'm reading the letter from the Ohio EPA, apparently to Senator Portman. Apparently he must have had some questions. I don't know how the letter came about. And I'm reading that letter, and it just reminds me what I said from the beginning, that I wish that our senators were weighing in on this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've only seen very vague answers.
They did weigh in on 2009. There's a letter
Right.
that they,
But now it's been very vague, and it says it's a local issue.
I think that's a
And I-
political maneuver.
And I don't understand how this is a local issue with all the parties that are involved. So, I think those are weak responses.
And if not, I'll move on to audience participation. I've got 10 people down, 2 minutes each. Make it brief if you can. Basically a statement if you like. The first person I have is Billy Spencer.
Well, this is the second time I've spoken for you guys, and they're all a bunch of great people, but I hope it's the last time, at least on this issue here. I'm no scientist or geologist or hydrologist or none of that. But I do know that the village of Piketon and all Pike County, except maybe one of our commissioners, is basically against this. The other 2 commissioners have asked for a stand down. But I think as far as you guys, I appreciate the time and effort you've given this. You only have to ask yourself a couple things. Is this the right decision for Southern Ohio? I've never lived anywhere in my life but Pike County. And I like that. I'm a Pike County boy. And what this all started back is when we asked the Ferguson group and Carl to, we had questions. And the village of Piketon spent their money, $70,000, and believe me, for us, that's as much as we'll spend paving in a year. It's a big expense, but it was that important to us to find out. And we just asked those guys to look over the information that was out there. And Carl was given one task. If you find out what DOE is saying, that this place is perfectly safe, as Joe's predecessor said, God created a perfect site for this cell. That was his words when council asked him, is the site fractured? Created a pristine site. We wanted to know if that's true. And if it's true, the village of Piketon's done. We're done, okay? We believe in what they said, but that ain't what he found. A Boy Scout in one of our meetings asked, I thought, the best question, and we had 200 people there, it was packed. What's the benefit of this cell to the community? They found a hard time answering that question. What's the benefit to the community? And I hope you guys stand with us. I hope you ask yourself that. What's the benefit to our community? And I say all of us here in Southern Ohio. Thank you.
Thank you. The next name I have is Marine Officials. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I work out there in waste management. And I guess the only thing I really have to say is why, if DOE came here and crapped up the area, if they contaminated the area, why as a community would we say it's okay for a subpar cleanup? Why would we agree to that? They came here, they did whatever they needed to do. We as a community should stand there and say, now you have to clean it up so we can reindustrialize it. Who's gonna wanna bring their company there? Who's, we have other areas there that are sitting empty and they don't have a radioactive waste dump. So why, as a community, would we say that that's okay? It shouldn't be. Thank you.
Next name I have on the list is Teresa Denneman. Is that correct? Did I say that right?
You said it perfectly. I'd like to pass my time on to someone else.
Okay, that's fine. Actually, I have a letter from a little girl I can read. I wish she would have stayed. She could have heard me read it.
Oh.
Christy Renner
Yes,
is
I
next.
need to come up there.
You don't have to. The mic's not on. You can talk from where you're at.
I guess I said what I had to say earlier, but in fact, again, to reindustrialize this site, the landfills, the plumes, the buildings we have, we've had our 65th anniversary. All that is there right now, going into our soil, has went up into the air. If we just have a way to clean it off, and we tried to, before all the Congress had their money funding issue, we had the timeline to clean this up in 10 years, and it could have happened if we had enough money pumped to it, and I'm also for the closure fund. The closure fund says, just like Fernald, Mound, and Rocky Flats, give us all the money we need, and we can clean this up and close it under budget in a shorter time frame. Because it just comes back to industrializing and jobs. When you look at the new paper plant in Circleville, look at that huge area up there. And they've already told us, in committees I've been before, that was not part of the SSAB, but for Shawnee State, the fact that there is not farmland like there used to be 10, 20, 30 years ago. If we think that it's going to be impossible to reindustrialize that site, once we have it cleaned up all the way, look, we have hundreds of acres to reindustrialize with. And again, as a board member, we just said, clean it up. I think pulling it all up, and I'm sorry, I respect Billy, I respect everybody here. To me, the fastest we can get it cleaned up and shift to a cell that's there that, maybe it's not the best solution, is, and I'm afraid, I've been to Utah, I've been to Nevada test site, You know, when I worked for Hematite, we shipped things to both places. We still had consideration and weights we had to look at there. I'm part of the NDA group. That means we look at everything down to the nth degree of what gets measured out, what's going to go here, what's going to go there. At Hematite, we measured things to the nth degree. And that was part of our process, what we had to do to look at everything. Because we wanted to save, in this place, Hematite, it's only 30 minutes for St. Louis, you know. We just want to industrialize this, so.
Thank you. I have Linda Copeland here. Lydia, I'm sorry. Lydia.
He gets everybody.
Okay. She would like to read her letter, actually. So if you like, just you step over there and just nice and loud read it to everybody.
Hello, my name is Lydia Copeland. I am 8. I live at 260 Long Street in Chillicothe. I am at the last meeting about the nuclear waste dump. It scared me a lot. I'm worried that something could go wrong and the water won't be safe. I'm worried the nice parks I go to will be ruined and the wildlife will be harmed. I'm worried I might have to move away, and I like it here. My mom tells me the risk is small, but she isn't sure. People make mistakes all the time. I feel bad for the people who would lose their jobs if the dump is not built. But it would be worse to ruin this whole beautiful place forever. Then no one would live or work here at all. The people who live around where they want to build the dump don't want, but nobody is listening to them because they are small. I know what that is like. I think every voice should matter. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, very much. Teresa, John, then?
Just take a second.
Yep, that's all right.
If we learn anything from Flint, Michigan, we can't be reckless with the groundwater. And although we can say it's Piketon and not us, it is us. And I urge our council to support us, your constituents, in passing the resolution to oppose the site at Piketon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next name on the list is Christy Leonard.
No, she's, I like one.
Oh, you already, that's right. I jumped too. Dennis,
Carr.
Carr, all right. Okay.
I appreciate it, and I don't want to reiterate a lot of the technical issues that were presented tonight. I would like the council to at least think back that we did spend 4.5 years walking through this decision process. No new facts have been presented. There's no new information. Everything was available at that time. And we came to the decision that we did based on, I think, very good reasoning. And it's like that the council were to reflect on some of those reasonings as to why did we opt not to have a decision to ship it all versus to have an on-site disposal facility. First off, from a protectiveness standpoint, there is no groundwater issue. In fact, it's a net benefit to groundwater because the plumes would be cleaned up. The same protective standards that are here must be applied to any disposal facility in the United States. Cost, we always hear about cost. There is about $1 billion difference. Last meeting, everybody talked about a $200 million difference. That's not correct. It is about $1 billion difference. But it's not about money, all right? As far as the as far as the support to the community, obviously this alternative, you've heard about it, it does support one of the priorities of the community, which is a reindustrialization by removing the landfills and plumes. Also, it's about implementability. Before you start talking about stepping away from this and moving to an off-site alternative, think about the communities. Think about the communities along the transportation route. It relies upon the goodwill of all of those communities over the next 25 years for them to continue to allow that material to come through their communities, and also relies on the continued availability. We would be totally reliant upon the availability of disposal capacity in other states. And I can tell you from being in this business for many years, that is not a certainty. In fact, it is a very suspect issue to think that this volume of material could be shipped safely across the United States, and that none of those doors would close over that time period. So think about implementability. I don't believe that you would find that this alternative really would be an implementable alternative to ship at all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. The next name I have here is Reverend Terry Williams.
I am a resident here in Ross County, and I think you already know how I feel about this. Mr. Carr has raised a very important concern in this whole process, that if we would go to an off-site disposal process, we would have to get the goodwill, essentially, of people to let this pass through their community, and he's expressed doubt as to whether people would let this go through their community. I have doubt as to whether material that other people don't want going through their community should be in our community. I have a deep concern today because we did go through a 4-year process that now, after that 4-year process has been completed, we found there were misstatements. That is the key issue in this, and our council doesn't need to understand geology to understand politics. There has been a change. There have been misstatements found in statements from the DOE. There have been concerns that have changed this game. And you as a council are being asked to simply say, we would like more time. We would like more time to open this decision, make sure everything was done correctly, make sure all the I's were dotted and all the T's were crossed. And even when we speak and say, we just want more time, it's not a no, it's just a delay. We have a tremendous, tremendous voice from the Department of Energy saying, no, 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 we can't stop the project. We have a concern because there are tons of jobs on the line. Guess what? When this goes in, we're not going to need a lot of people to guard a hill that nobody wants to stand on. We're not going to need a lot of those jobs. And the reindustrialization of that site, if it follows Frenalt, will have nothing. Take a look at what's at Frenalt today, a visitor's center. I'm deeply concerned today. I know others are deeply concerned. I'd like those who came today to oppose this to please stand so that our council can see how many people have come out today. If you are concerned about not having enough people here, we can bring people. We can bring people not only from Pike County, but from Ross County as well, because this is not in the best interest of our community. This is a moral issue. It's something that you're going to have to think long and hard about as citizens who've not just been here 5 or 10 or 15 years. Some of us have had people in this side of River Valley for over 200 years. I look around and look at some of these names. Patricks and Corcorans, Hirsches, Hines. How many of us have lived here and had a vested interest? Not 5 years, not 10 years, 200 years. And hopefully people like Lydia Copeland can live here 200 years from now. Thank you.
Next name I have is Frank Johnston.
Yes, my name is Frank Johnston. I'm the Director of Environmental Protection for BWXT. And I just wanted to just bring a real quick couple points to your attention. You have a lot of information to digest from a regulatory perspective. And that's where I get involved a lot in supporting what's going on is from the regulations. DOE, Ohio EPA, and FBP adopted over 800 regulations that defined the envelope, the safety envelope, the regulatory envelope for this solution. Those regulations included regulations for siting, design, construction, operation, and closure, addressing low-level waste, asbestos waste, hazardous waste, solid waste, construction and demolition debris waste, and Toxic Substances Control Act waste. So there is a lot of regulations that have been brought to bear to ensure that this facility is safe, all the way from design through closure. The only other thing I would mention is that there is, out of all those 800 regulations, only one has really come into question, and it's that TSCA regulations related to a 50 feet separation. We believe that our interpretation is correct, but even if we allow that the other interpretation is correct, the TSCA regulations themselves allow a remedy as long as you demonstrate it is protective of human health and the environment. And there's been honestly too little discussion tonight, I thought there'd be more, on the design of the OSWDF, which is absolutely state-of-the-art. And that will protect human health and the environment. So that condition, while it's important, I'm just saying, you can accomplish what is intended to be accomplished here with the design of the OSWDF. And this gentleman over here mentioned Fernald. The other thing I would like to say that's unrelated is the Department of Energy at Fernald delivered the solution that the community at Fernald wanted. They wanted a park. They did not want reindustrialization. The Department of Energy here, I believe, is sincere in trying to deliver that solution to this community, is reindustrialization. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I have Mark Johnson, is the next name on the list. Yes.
Yeah, I'm Mark Johnson. I live at 330 Redbud Road in Chillicothe. I'm the building trades representative, a large amount of the workforce down at the Piketon facility. I have friends on both sides of this issue, and this is a very, very complicated issue that you can't learn in one night, one day, or 1 month even. But the SSAB had many subcommittee meetings, and they came to the conclusion was the existing landfills is the main issue with them, and to reindustrialize the site, as somebody in construction, you cannot build anything on top of such a thing. And it was our understanding at the time that nothing was required from the federal government to do anything with these sites, these existing landfills. And I would think everybody in this room would rather see that material in a state-of-the-art engineered disposal cell versus being where it's at right now with no liner whatsoever. And who knows what all's buried in there. But there has to be a reason. We're living in a time frame politically, and everything is politics at this site about funding. And we're living in a time where the federal government can't come up with $350 million to replace a bridge down in Cincinnati, the Brent Spence Bridge. It's ready to fall in the river for an interstate highway runs in. And it has to be reasonable, and a balanced issue was the reason the SSAB did what they did. They wanted to get these existing landfills cleaned up, and that's the reason that they made the recommendation that they did. And what no one has talked about tonight was we got over 2,000 workers at this site right now, and just to say ship it or stick it, I don't think that's an option that's really a valuable option that's exactly going to work in order to get what we need to get accomplished. But I would urge you to really consider what we're talking about here, and we want Portsmouth and Pike, they call it the Portsmouth site, but we want the Piketon site to be reindustrialized, and I'm all for getting these existing landfills cleaned up and the flumes cleaned up, and we've got to be reasonable, but no one says that the on-site waste disposal facility's got to stay there forever. We may have a time down the road where we've got more stimulus money coming out of the sky where we could ship it off to some place that was reasonable, but this is the option that was presented, and 4 years of study through the on-site SSAB people and people.
How long
like
you going to let
Bruce
him go, Bruce?
And Will, but I just think we need to really consider the 2,000 families that's working out here at this site and what's going to happen if we make the decision that everything has to be shipped.
Thank you. I will tell you, you're out of order asking that. I am up here to control that. I will let either side go over a little bit, the other side has as well. I've been asked on the last meeting, said, oh, you let the other side talk more than the other. I will tell you this, if anybody has any questions on that, the people from the Piketon facility site talked 11 minutes. The people on the Piketon Village Council site talked 18 and a half. So it's perception.
It's a public meeting.
Okay?
It's a public meeting and afforded to
It's a
individuals.
public meeting, and I'm trying to keep control of it. And I am the one that is keeping control of it, thank you.
Not well.
The next name I have on the list is Greg Kempton.
Greg Kempton, I'm village, mayor of the village of Waverly. One of the things that's really, I cannot get over with this whole conversation, and like Mr. Carr talked about stepping through this for 4.5 years to get here. 4.5 years, all this time, and act like it's unreasonable for us to push back on this issue. 4.5 years, there is nothing in writing. Nothing. They're talking about cleaning up all these other plumes, and my request has always been, show me on paper what you will do, and then we can talk about it. If nothing's in writing, nothing's on paper, how can we agree to something going forward for a couple decades of work? I don't think there's an elected official in this room that would enter into a $100,000 contract tomorrow with nothing in writing. $14 billion? Something that's going to last for generations and generations? I mean, this is a long-term decision. I mean, this is something that's going to outlive all of us. I mean, the last thing we want's our name remembered in history over a decision, something like this, going, really sour. If you look at the data in the tables, okay, there has been some misrepresentation. Maybe that's human error, whatever. But if you want to believe that's human error, just taking tables from a graph and representing it, what happens if you have the same human error in the engineering calculations? We're betting on 100 years or 1,000 years on this. Even if that's there, what happens at 1,001?
Thank you, Mr. Kempton. Pretty much that concludes the scheduling of the meeting for this evening. However, this is a council meeting, so if anybody else still has anything to say, council members, or anybody has anything to say, you're more than welcome to. If not, then you can say then that this review session is over. There's some displays here if anybody wants to look at. You're welcome to come across the barrier there to look at. I will stay here for a little while. So